Welcome. I'm Riley Karsh.
I'm Tova Kopan.
We are thrilled to bring you the We Go Boldly podcast.
Let's talk big burning questions, life changes, and maybe a bit of personal business.
Let's be bold and brave together. Are you ready?
I am. Here comes the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the We Go Boldly podcast. We are, as always, so very happy to have you with us today on the season 6 series on busyness and self-worth. Today we're going to talk about parenting, which is something I don't know that we've had a full parenting episode.
We've had one.
Okay, we've had one full parenting episode, which I find surprising since we are full-time parents.
I was going to say, we do a lot of it.
We do a lot of parenting. So I'm excited to talk about this today. I'm going to try and keep my shock, awe, horror down to a reasonable level as we go through this conversation regarding Pinterest parenting challenges, how you deal with raising kids in, social media age, all the things, and how it relates to self-worth and busyness. But before we fully dive into that, I will do what I always do and welcome my fantastical, fabulous, wonderful, lovely, all the good things co-host Tova to the show. How are you today? What's going on?
That is a loaded question. I don't know. This as the season goes on, I feel like I'm continuing to have an awakening of sorts. Right? So at the beginning it was like, oh, I have stuff I need to work on. And now I think I'm like passing the buck, just like blaming society at large.
So she's saying you guys have stuff you have to work on. I'm just putting it out there.
You as like the larger society. So speaking of which, when this episode drops, which is like shockingly close to the end of what I consider summer, which is Labor Day weekend. We're getting very, very close. There are 66 days left until the midterms.
Yes.
So just, if you don't know what that means, feel free to send us a message.
We'll help you.
We'll help you. If you are, basics, everybody in the United States gets to vote on that day, that, is registered to vote. So step one, make sure you're registered to vote. And that's what I mean by society at large. And no, I'm doing well today. It is still in the what we are going to call the dog days of summer. You and I had a long conversation yesterday. I think it was mostly me, kind of stream of consciousness about August and about how, as a kid, August was when school started, but now my kids don't start till September. Also, August, I had already finished most of my summer vacations, and now this is when we go on vacation. So I'm really trying to embrace August. And we'll see how it works. When you listen to this, I will have already come back from vacation. I haven't gone on vacation yet. So we'll see how we do with the embracing of August. But I'm leaning into it.
All right. Well, that seems good. I am also leaning into August, although I've always loved August. August was when I used to go visit my grandparents in Florida by myself, and I would sit by the pool and read probably inappropriate novels for my age.
Smart.
And listen to big band music and hang out with the ladies by the pool and drink iced tea and have the best time ever. So it was my favorite thing to do as a preteen teen in the summer. And so I have very fond memories of that time.
So now that you mention it, August is often when I would go to visit my family in Maine. And I think that might be why I think of August as farther in the summer to fall transition.
Yeah.
Because it was cooler there.
Well, and it was cooler then because, climate change.
Yeah. So speaking of which, 66 days.
Full circle, people. Full circle.
I there's a lot going on in the world, and I think that part of what's going to make me be more productive as a human being is to remind our lovely listeners every week how many days are left until the midterm
Yes.
elections.
Yes.
Every election matters because they're midterm elections. That's exciting for Congress, but I bet you have a great town council election or school board.
Yep.
And I'm going to take it from school to parenting. What happens in our schools is so important. And it goes to concepts that we've talked about in our last episode when we were talking about goal setting and achievement culture. And it really matters who is taking the lead in our smaller communities.
It does, and it matters who sets the tone for your community as well. So just think about that for the foreseeable future, forever. I don't know, as much as you can, and get involved where you can and how you can. So, but talking about parenting, which is what we're doing today, I think we've all been inundated, whether on social media or mainstream media, wherever, with this idea that parenting requires perfection. And whether we realize that it is perfection that's being required or not,
Yep.
it's what we're being bombarded with. You see these images of birthday parties, and they are like the most curated, perfect birthday party with every single imaginable detail down to the last, possible thing. Everything's coordinated, everything's perfect, everything's thematic, and you see it and you're thinking, "Oh gosh, why am I not doing that for my kid?" Then, my kid's not going to get into Harvard because I didn't give them the perfect Harry Potter birthday party, right? Like, and that's completely irrational, but it is something that we are bombarded with as parents. And it's this Pinterest perfect parenting concept that we're talking about today. And I know when I was a first time mom, it really hit me hard because I am a perfectionist and it's something I've struggled with to begin with. And then throw in a new baby and throw in, other struggles that you might be having. And you're going, oh no, my kid's not sleeping perfectly. My kid's not eating perfectly. There's obviously something wrong with me. I am failing. I am a failure. What have I done? And now I'm ruining this human
Right.
as they're growing. And that's like a huge recipe for disaster. And it's not great for your kids. So that's what we're talking about today, is how do we deal with all of that? As I love to do, we're going to talk about a definition up front. And so when I was doing some of the research for this episode, I did actually find a definition of Pinterest perfect parenting that I liked, because it sort of helped lay the groundwork for doing the research, which was hard. There's not a ton of information out there about this concept because it's relatively new and it's uncomfortable, and it's not necessarily something that, psychologists and psychiatrists and people are necessarily interested in studying because it's about women. Um, so I mean, it's also about men,
Outrage.
but there's not as much information out there yet. But this is the definition that I found that I think provides us a good starting point to work from. And so that definition is that Pinterest perfect parents are parents who are so obsessed with their image as peerless mothers and fathers that they simply had to share the latest selfie or carefully curated image on social media. For these parents, their lack of object permanence is so profound, the phrase "pics or it didn't happen" is tragically accurate to them. So that's a little harsh, I realize, but and there are degrees, I think, of that experience, right? Like there are people we know in our lives where that is true to that for them, like to the extreme, and there are people in our lives where that's a little bit true. So I don't think it has to be all or nothing is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and I will make one caveat as someone who really likes to throw a good themed party. That there is that we're using Pinterest because it's become this kind of like
Yeah.
cliche example. Like, I love throwing themed birthday parties. I have enjoyed them immensely for all of my kids, and I love when they pick a good one and that I can like really sink my teeth into and do like really cute stuff. I find it super enjoyable. It lets me have this like crafty side that I don't think I actually knew existed. Um, and you know, I love to like find these things on Pinterest, like the little teacher gifts, and it says like I can't think of anything, but like oh, I know. I once gave teachers the this was way before COVID, but hand sanitizer, and it said something like spread love not germs, and it was so cute and whatever. So this is not like an attack on people who like cute things
No, not at all.
or if you like to go to Pinterest for a variety of things, but this is more because when you talk about a Pinterest perfect parent, we all have that person in our head and
Right.
we like know who you're talking about. So I just wanted to make that slight caveat because if you go back through my Instagram, you will see many, many, many themed birthday parties, and I find great joy in them. And I appreciate that my kids are staggered in such a way that almost the whole year I get to be planning someone's birthday party. So I just wanted to say that. But this is a very specific and different experience. And I also, apart from the party side of things, I think of it as that like desire to like live a curated life, but in real life, where it's not meant to actually be curated. It's actually like when we try to take, you assume that what you see, well, hopefully at this point, you assume that what you see on social media is most people's best days, best picture out of 20 and best, whatever. And it's not the nitty gritty of their real life. Now, there are people who are very good at sharing the nitty gritty of their real life. But even that might be to a specific end. I don't know. Right. Maybe it's to be like, look, I'm so normal. Right. And so, but I think that it's especially difficult when somebody tries to have that experience like outside of social media. When it's like, well, like that is what I kind of picture is when you're like, no, how do you maintain perfection all of the time?
Yeah, and the the problem with doing this, right, all of the time is that there's no breathing room. There's no room for mistakes. There's no room for errors. There's no room for mess or creativity or messiness or problems in your life. There's no room for your, if you have kids, there's no room for your kids to be kids. And so if you are the parent who, and it could be the mother or the father or how, whatever your family system is, it's irrelevant.
Right.
It's the if the parental figure is living this curated Pinterest life and not allowing for the normalcy to exist, then what they're doing is creating a world where everyone has to be perfect all the time. And that is suffocating. And if you're not allowing the people in your life the room to not be curated, to have whimsy, to, make mistakes, to have trial and error, to have Pinterest fails, to, to laugh at the mistakes, to have these moments of just messiness and disaster, then you're constantly seeking perfection. And as we know, perfectionism leads to feelings of, not being worthy, which is obviously what we've been talking about all season. And if you're constantly trying to prove, okay, I'm worthy, I'm worthy, I'm worthy, then you're not really going to get there. It's not coming from inside of you. It's not coming from your internal feeling of worthiness, of being of value, of being just an inherently worthy human for existing.
Yeah, and I think, as you were talking, I was thinking about conversations that we've had in the past where if you don't allow space for things like sadness and grief, you're not allowing space for joy, and vice versa. Like it was okay to feel joy during the pandemic. We have to have space for all of our feelings and experiences. And when you are not allowing that to happen, and listen, I don't allow my kids to have slime in the house because I don't want to fight about with them, about them, probably both, about slime getting stuck on things. So like, I don't let them have slime in the house. Hopefully they will still have a fulfilling childhood without slime in our house.
I suspect.
Um, but like, so we're not saying like, your kids need to be, barefoot and, running around with mud everywhere. But because we all have to exist and
Right.
like function as people. But there is this there is this line, and for me the hardest part is when I do find myself attempting to be perfect at something in the parenting world. um what I often find is that I am then failing my kids, most definitely, as their parent. Like I cannot do both. If I feel myself pushing too hard and we need to do this and we need to do that, and it often comes at a time of high stress, as someone who has relied heavily on perfectionism to get me through life, right? When life gets stressful, then that's something I fall back on. And fortunately, I have worked hard to try to raise my kids to be felt comfortable calling me on some of my nonsense. And so like sometimes they're the ones that are like, "What are you doing?
Yeah.
Like what is your problem?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, okay." But I think that when I feel that pressure of making things perfect, then I start focusing on that. And then it's like, nothing's going right. Why don't we have a good bedtime routine? I printed all these sheets off of Pinterest for how to have a good bedtime routine, and we can't have a good bedtime routine. And I'm a horrible parent, and you're never gonna, I don't know, succeed in life because you don't know how to go to sleep. Right. And it's like
It snowballs,
it
right?
snowballs. And I I'm not offering solutions. No, but I mean, we have to be realistic about our expectations, that we feel, because when I do feel like I am, quote, failing at things in parenting, that's also when I allowed guilt or shame for not
Mm-hmm.
being better to sneak in, and not sneak in, to stampede in.
Yes.
And sneaks, like, shame doesn't sneak.
No.
Shame's like, "Hello, let me hit you over the head with a frying
Right.
pan." um and and that is when I find the worst thing that happens, which, because I need all the patience I can possibly muster to parent three children, is I lose patience.
Mm.
And for me, like, it is a quick line, a direct path from attempting to be perfect to losing patience. And then I can't be half of the parent that I want to be if I've lost my patience. Um,
Yeah. And it's not just that you've lost patience with your kids. You're losing patience with yourself, right?
yes. Yeah.
And then you're frustrated and you're beating yourself up and it comes out as losing patience with your kids. And we've all, I don't know any parent who hasn't been there. I certainly have. And it as we were just saying, it snowballs and it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger until you can sort of get a handle on it and reset, which it's perfectly normal. Like, this is not an unusual occurrence for people to go through. The
Yeah.
biggest and I think most important factor is a self-awareness aspect, and that's we're going to talk about that a little later in the show, of how to kind of deal with these feelings of perfectionism and this need to you know keep up with the Joneses and this urge to be the best parent and to make the best kids and have the best life. And, that feeling like, oh,
Yeah.
I've got to do everything right all the time. Otherwise, like you just said, like, my kid's never going to like amount to anything because I haven't done everything perfectly, which is obviously not true, right? Like, we're sitting here and we
Well,
made it.
but also, I think, and I might be jumping, the gun, and I think that we spent a lot of time talking about the outline, so I specifically wouldn't do this. But
That's
apparently I
okay.
don't care.
Oh no, it's
Um,
not perfect.
but like, what does amount to something even
Well,
mean?
right, exactly. Like, are you gonna suddenly not amount to something? You're already something.
Yeah, but like, no, seriously, like, what does amount to something mean, right? Because like, we we want our kids, and I've really been thinking about this a lot, because we have been talking to older, wiser, not really older, but parents of older kids, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Who have been either, whether it's 3 years older or 8 years older, and they're off to college. And it is, I've been so thankful for these conversations we've been having, because it has reminded me of, you know, what my expectations for my children's lives are, right? And like, what are realistic expectations? And, you know, what what does amount to something mean for them? And what do I want it to look like for them, right? And I don't want just to be like, follow your dreams and be happy, because like, what is that? I don't know what that is. I mean, I do want you to follow your dreams and be happy, but
Right.
like I also want you to have a goal, like a smart goal that
Right.
you can
Want to
like
be a
know
little
that
more
you,
concrete than that.
yeah, that you achieved. But like, I want my kids to, and this is something somebody said, is I really just want them to have the spark that they like came into this world with, like through high school. So like, let's figure out how to get there. And it might not be having straight A's and taking
Right.
boring classes, you know, and
Yeah.
that might not get them there. So, and you and I have both had the experiences of looking at people who have been amazingly successful after going to Ivy League colleges, and like being the first in their family. I'm not talking about legacies. First in the family, going to Ivy League colleges, being amazingly successful, and then people who have gone to community college for 2 years, to a state college for 2 years, and been amazingly successful.
Right.
And the longer I am existing in the world, the more I realize it has very little to do with the college and everything to do with the person.
Yes.
So it's like, how
Yes.
do we create those people?
It has everything to do with the person and the opportunities and
Right.
the support systems, right? And so, you know, from that perspective, it gives us a little more freedom to stop worrying so much and start being more present. And so, one of the things that perfectionism robs us of and steals from us is our presence and
Yes.
not enjoying the moment, right? If all you're worried about is my cake perfect? And I keep going back to this because this is something that I just don't care about. And I know, I'm sorry, Tova, I know you do. Um, but it's my
I care about
example.
it because I like it,
I,
not
I
because
know.
I
That's why I'm
like.
sorry. This is my example. Other people can care about this, and it's awesome. I don't mean to like dump on it. There's nothing wrong with caring about party planning. I just am, it's not my jam. That's why it's my example. But like if I spent all my time worrying if my cake was perfect for my kid and if it had like the perfect dolphin tail coming out of the top and all the frosting was exactly how it should
I want a
be,
cake with a dolphin tail,
well,
just as an
you can make
aside.
one for me. Um, it's but if that's what I was doing for her
Right.
entire 10th birthday, I don't know why I picked dolphins. She doesn't even like dolphins. But if that's all I was doing, I would miss her whole birthday, right? Like I wouldn't
Right.
experience my kid's birthday because I'd be so focused on her cake and her decorations and was her party okay and all these things. I wouldn't have the joy of her and her birthday and a day that was really important to me. And she wouldn't have me present for her. She'd just have a cake that she would probably eat like half of and be like, "Oh, that's nice, mom. Whatever. You could have gotten me a cake from Costco."
Which my kids like better, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Uh,
but the point of that whole little snippet is that you know the things we remember as adults now, looking back on our childhood, are not necessarily the things that our parents thought we would remember. When I was talking to my mom about this episode that I was gonna, that we were gonna record today, I was telling her what we were doing, and I was like, the birthday party I remember the most is when you got me Juicy Juice in that big giant can, and you opened it with like a pop key, and it was like heaven because I didn't get to have sugary things when I was little, and she opened that can, and I was like, I can't even tell you guys how excited I was. And I remember it. I remember every detail of that birthday party, sitting around the table with my girlfriends. I was like, I don't know, I was probably like 7, party hats, cake my mom made. And my mom's cakes were always tilted. I don't know why. She's a really good baker, but her cakes were always tilted. And she opened that Juicy Juice can, and I was like in seventh heaven. And it was a very different experience than, something where it was super curated or whatever. And then we went outside and we like played in the mud. I don't know. Um, but to, if we need perspective, all we have to do is look back in our own childhoods and like, what
Well,
are our best memories?
I think that's the magic word. Is perspective.
Yeah.
So in addition to when you are focused on perfection in your life, in any aspect of your life, you are not present. You can't be present. You cannot possibly maintain a feeling of I am present, I am here, and still trying to be perfect. Like
Right.
it is not, it does not compute. But I think equally as important is you lose perspective about I think it's I don't want to say about what's important because I think things that you're trying to be perfect about from big picture could be very important. So I don't want to like minimize someone's desire to be perfect,
Yeah.
but you you lose perspective about maybe why you're doing something. I think oftentimes you like it's very easy to like get in the weeds.
Yes.
And I think back and obviously there are many, many downsides to the pandemic, obviously, when they continue. They actively continue. But I think about my son who, his fourth birthday was basically canceled because it was 2 days after March 13th when everything shut down. And his next year, his birthday that was, during the pandemic in 2021 was a drive-by birthday. And the only person who came was like, I think my mom and her dog. And I think they were vaccinated at that point, maybe, I think. I'm not sure if they even came. But it was a drive-by birthday and he loved it. Now he is a hardcore introvert, but he had the best time waving to all of his friends. They, at that point, we were almost a full year into this thing. And so people had the signs and the noisemakers, like they knew how to do it. Like this wasn't a confusing process for people, but he got to wave to people. They gave him presents that he got to play with. And like that was it. And then we had cake in the house. Everybody else went home. And, he thought it was like the best birthday. I don't know if he'll remember it, but he thought it was great. And I think that, like, I mean, sometimes the kid's favorite part of a birthday is, for my oldest, it was playing a kickball game. He got to play a kickball game. For my youngest, it's probably when he was 5, it's probably the presents, if I'm to be perfectly honest. He sees all of his favorite friends at daycare every single day. He
Right.
doesn't need to play with them on Saturdays too, you know?
Yep.
Like, and so he likes getting the presents and having pizza. I don't know, and so I think that sometimes when we are striving so hard, whether it is I'm going to be perfect so that nothing ever goes wrong in my child's life, we miss like what the actual goals are, which is probably not to raise a kid who never has anything that ever bad happens to them, unfortunately, because we need to be here when they have bad things happen to them so we can help them through it.
Yeah. And so that they can figure out how to process those things at an appropriate age, right? Like
Right.
you don't want the first time your kid is figuring out how to deal with hurt feelings to be when they're 25. I mean, that's obviously like an exaggerated
But you could
example.
see how it would happen.
Well, with some of the helicopter parenting I see, yeah, I could see how it would happen. But, people have to learn how to process experiences, and we all have to learn how to deal with things. And it's hard. It's hard as a parent. I mean, you want
Yeah.
to protect your kids. It's a natural instinct. I get it. I want that. I never want to watch my kids suffer. And I've seen it and it's awful. I hate every second of it. But at the same time, I want resilient kids. I want kids who know how to deal with hard things in life because that's going to happen. And I want them to know how to deal with it in a way that's healthy, not in a way that
Right.
hurts them or anyone else. So, in order for that to happen, I have to give them breathing room at an age appropriate way for them to do that. And that's hard. It's hard as a parent to
Oh,
do
it
that.
really sucks. Yeah.
It's not pleasant. We
Uh,
do need to take a
I was gonna say,
break.
speaking of breathing room.
We need to take a quick break. So we'll go ahead and do that, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation on parenting and sort of how we muddle through it all. I don't know. I don't even know what to say about it at this point. But we'll be right back. Hey Tova, you know what I love?
Coffee, definitions, uninterrupted reading time.
Okay, all of those things are true, but I also love maps.
As in Siri, take me to the beach.
Yeah. Also, as in, who am I really and who do I want to be?
Yeah, I figured that's what you meant, but I also have the beach on my mind. So,
Well, we were talking about things we love, so that definitely makes sense. But the map I was thinking about is our Defining You course.
yes, we put together defining you as a way to map where you are and how you want to live your life.
So true. So many people struggle to find their purpose in a busy and noisy world.
That's why we made Defining You, our course meant to guide you to creating your own mission statement.
And there's good news. You can get it now on teachable.com. Find the link on our website at goboldlyinitiative.com/courses, or check out the link on our Instagram bio at Go Boldly Together.
We can't wait to see you there. Now, let's head back to the show.
Okay, so welcome back, everyone. And as we were saying before the break, we were talking about perfectionism and parenting and Pinterest perfect parents and that whole concept of feeling like you need to present to the world that everything is perfect in your home. And one thing I didn't put in the outline, but I do want to touch on this topic, is that can also become extremely isolating. If you're telling the world that everything is perfect all the time, uh, you're not, well, obviously you're not being honest, because I don't know anyone where everything's perfect all the time, but it's also a great way to push people away, right? Like if you're never telling anyone the truth about how you feel or what's going on, or the fact that your kid has, a temper tantrum every time you try to put them to bed at night and you don't know what to do, or they have really bad allergies to everything and you can't feed them anything and you don't know how to manage it, or whatever
Right.
it is, whatever your struggle is, and we all have them, then you're isolating yourself. And that's hard. I mean, that just makes a hard situation harder. And there's no real reason for it other than, you're afraid of being judged, or you're afraid people won't, want to be your friend, or you're afraid people won't want to help you, or whatever your fear might be. And I know, when I first had, when I had my first child, I was very isolated because I had just had a child and I didn't know any other parents. I think I was the first of my friends to have a child, and she needed to have surgery at 3 months, and I couldn't take her anywhere because I couldn't have her get sick because she really had to have the surgery. And so for 3 months we were basically stuck at home together. It was extremely isolating, and I didn't talk to anyone. And by the time she had the surgery, I was a mess. I was like emotionally drained. I was exhausted. I was sad. I was depressed. I was a disaster. And thank goodness I had my mom who would come in and see me and be like, oh my goodness, give me the baby, go for a walk. You're a mess, uh, in a loving way. But, it was really, really hard. And so I can imagine if you do that continuously for years, where you act as if nothing is wrong when something is, wrong. I mean, in that case, it was scary and I was afraid on top of all of the other things. And I had no one to talk to other than, my close family. And it wasn't in my nature to be like, oh, I'm scared. So I didn't even talk about that. But I can imagine that level of isolation really does a number on how you feel about yourself. You feel like you have to be strong and perfect all the time. That that really doesn't make you feel worthwhile or valuable or connected. And
Well,
so,
yeah.
if you're going on in that sort of constant rotation of feelings, that's just not very healthy.
Well, and I think a few things happened. I mean, your case was an extreme case where you were forced in that situation of
Yes.
isolation. Um, but a few things, like you had mentioned, like you're not, you're not admitting anything's wrong. And we don't mean something's wrong in like a bad way. We mean like normal.
Yeah.
Like things are just normal is not perfect.
Right.
That's how normal is. And so if you are having an expectation um of perfection, then even normal feels like things are bad when
Mm-hmm.
they're just normal. And going back to my example of the bedtime routine, that happens for me a lot where I'll be like, oh, I want them to have a better bedtime routine. I'm so frustrated. They used to go to bed so early and now they don't go to bed early and it's all my fault. Blah, 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 blah. And I'm not having realistic expectations for myself or for them. And so where I feel like something is wrong, it's just normal. And the other thing that happens is if you are not sharing with the world, and we've talked about this probably in nauseam, but I'm going to keep talking about it because it's so important. If you are not being vulnerable to the world will not be vulnerable with you, right? So if you are not willing to share with somebody that things are not perfect, if you're not willing to be normal, which means some days things are great. And when we say perfect, like everybody has different priorities, right? So some people's their priority is they do not leave the house without like a full face of makeup. Clearly, that is not me.
Or me.
Um, but that is their priority. Awesome. And then they let something else slide. Great. But like we all have to figure out what we're willing to let slide and not, but realistically, something has to slide. And so I think what happens though is if you are only putting out a perfect persona into the world, and you're and curated content, other people will not be vulnerable with you. And so then you now think that what you do is normal and that is the expectation that everyone has on themselves and you and anything else. And so you're not spending the time looking at other people going, oh, they don't do this, they're not putting this emphasis on that. Either you are not paying attention or maybe you're patting yourself on the back, but probably not. Probably you're just not paying attention to what other people are doing, because none of us really do. But I think what happens then is you actually think perfect is normal, and so your whole like basis and connection in reality becomes it disconnected, and so it's even harder to find your sense of worth because you're so disconnected with um what not being a perfect parent looks like. And clearly we're like we don't think perfection is achievable, but we're just doing this under the assumption that somebody thinks it's achievable.
I tried. It didn't happen for me. So let me know if you get there,
You
anyone.
let that go.
So interestingly, when I was researching, I found this article, this study, and it made two of us super angry. Uh, and I can't say that I particularly enjoyed it, but I found it interesting. Um, about sort of what happens when we're so focused on parenting perfectly that we forget to enjoy things. And that's what I was looking for. And so I found this article on 4 parenting types that contribute to perfectionism. And the reason it made both of us kind of go, oh God, is that, you can find yourself in all of these parenting types. So this is my caveat to this section of the research is that we're
This
talking about
hateful attack on us.
I'm talking about extreme examples, right? You can find yourself in anything. We're all demanding sometimes. We're all perfectionists sometimes. We're all overwhelmed sometimes. We all have, all of these traits find us at different times in our lives, and that's normal. That's okay. It's this is not a critique of who you are. However, these examples are of the sort of more extreme versions of these personality types. So if you want to think about, are you a perfectionist type parent? These are some examples of, you know, am I a perfectionist? Or more, I think more interestingly, did I grow up with perfectionist parents, and did that help me turn into a perfectionist? So just sort of something to think about when we're having this conversation. And so the four parenting types that contribute to perfectionism, according to this particular psychology study, are demanding parents. So these parents typically tell their children how to be. They value achievements. They have external markers of success like awards, grades, money, titles, and they're overly concerned with what other people think. So they see their children as an extension of themselves, and they actually derive some of their own self esteem from their kids' achievements. They feel embarrassed or inadequate if their children are less than perfect. And that in turn erodes their kids' self esteem. So the kid becomes very hard on themselves. That kid also learns that love is conditional. They're lovable only when they please others. And perfection becomes a way to gain acceptance, love, and praise. So you can see how this type of parenting creates a perfectionist child. So you have a demanding parent who's also I mean, that's generally a perfectionist as well. But you have a demanding parent, and in turn that creates a perfectionist child, and it also creates a child who lacks in a feeling of self-worth, which,
Right.
you know, plays into our whole purpose for this conversation is where do you get your self-worth? How do you derive self-worth? Well, if your foundation, your parent, which is your family systems usually, is is built on this sort of demanding parenting type, your self-worth has been eroded. It hasn't really been built on something stable. And so you probably don't have a strong sense of self-worth. Now, if you are a demanding parent, if you heard that all and you're like, "Oh no, that's me." And I don't mean that's me on like last Tuesday when I didn't sleep all night and I forgot to eat and I had a really bad day and my car got hit, and that it's is that me all the time, every
Right.
single day, day in and day out, then it's something to think about and something to check and look into. These are just suggestions. So that's one type.
And just as we go through these, I think it's really important to remember that all of these types, while they're super important, we are all modeling behavior for our kids. And so it is unlikely that we are demanding for them and not demanding for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I would add like a demanding parent could be a parent who is also just very hard on themselves, whether it's demanding, whether you would describe that as demanding or perfectionist. But like if kids think that that's the way a parent should be and they hear that talk track and they hear the, oh, I should have been doing this. Oh, that was so dumb of me. I can't believe I did that. Oh, I can't believe this is going to happen. I got to do, like they're hearing all of that. So even if you think that you're not passing that on to your kids because you're like, I haven't done that, um, you probably are. And I say you, I mean we probably are, right? We've talked a lot about the perfectionist parent, but there's some other kinds. There's the distracted one, and we will emphasize once again, this isn't if you're like randomly distracted, but like all the time. So in this case, they're saying they may not outwardly demand perfection, but some parents give the message that success is what makes you worthwhile. And so sometimes you hear a lot about kids who like act out to get their parents' attention, but then on the flip side, there's also kids who are perfect or get the grades or get whatever they think that you need to pay attention to them, right? And they will just keep trying to move the bar higher and higher, so you keep sending them your attention and your love is what they think that they're trying to get. And then this might be one where I almost threw the laptop against the wall. Was the overwhelmed parents, right? So these parents would lack the skills to effectively cope with life's challenges and their children's needs. I may have started yelling things about capitalism and the patriarchy here. Um, but some parents who are chronically overwhelmed due to their own trauma, mental illness, addiction, or cognitive impairment. Others are overwhelmed by chronic stressors such as a very sick child, unemployment. I mean, had I kept reading before I was about to throw my laptop, I would have read that like these are these are things that are often to a certain extent out of the control of a parent,
Right.
very much so. And what perfectionism in this instance is very often a trauma response for a child. A
Yes.
parent in this case does not realize that that's the expectation that they're placing on the child when they're doing this.
Or even if
So
they do realize it, it's out of their control.
it's out of their control, or frankly they need that child to be they really do need that child to be perfect
Right.
because
Or
they
they do
can.
need that child to take care of the younger children. Or
Right.
they, you know,
Right. And so that one is a particularly difficult, we're not bringing answers here other than I will say it is never a bad thing to go to a therapist and have the therapist say, "You're perfect. Everything's fine. You don't need me." I
right.
don't know if they ever say that, but feel free to give that a try because if you are feeling any of these things, but especially the overwhelmed one, um, going to talking it out and really figuring out what is in your control and what's not in your control and what you can try to do, because once again in this case that perfectionism that you're needing to expect of a child can be really difficult for that child, and it sounds like what you're going through is very difficult as well,
Right.
so seek therapy,
Yes.
among other things, which obviously if you're dealing with a very sick child, unemployment, poverty, or health problems is not the easiest thing to do, but if you can, uh, fortunately there are a lot of options now for therapy when it comes to like apps. And I had not realized many of them are covered by insurance. And it's a lot cheaper than seeing a therapist in person. So just throwing that out there. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't said that in a couple shows.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Um, so we also have from the research some keys, some signs that you know, if you are curious, if you're not sure, some signs that you might be expecting yourself to be a perfect parent. So, just a few things to look out for. If you find that you're criticizing yourself often, if you're blaming yourself when your child doesn't succeed, if you're comparing yourself to other parents and feeling like you fall short, beating yourself up for not being able to do more for your kids, despite the fact that you do a lot for them already, like most of us.
I was going to
Um,
say, tell me to the part where we're just not being normal parents, but
right. Yeah, if you're constantly second guessing your parenting choices, if you're losing your cool often because your expectations are too high. I think that's the most important one
yeah,
is learning to set reasonable expectations for
yes.
yourself. Which is so hard. I
And
mean,
for your kids.
yes, and not
For
just in parenting. Like that's key for life.
yes.
Um, but it's really hard. It's a hard thing to do. So I would take that to heart if you can, and just start to work on that, if nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that that is a good point. And I think that, I made a joke about like, tell me what's not normal here. Cause I think we all experience certain aspects of this,
Mm-hmm.
of that feeling of like you're falling short. But I think that for me, it is that feeling of where when I describe patience running out, it's that losing your cool because your expectations are too high.
Yeah.
And oftentimes my expectations on myself are too high, but it doesn't come across to my kids, right? My kids aren't saying, well, mommy is just expecting way too much of herself as a parent today, and
Right.
like and that's why she just yelled at us. That's not what I'm getting across to them. What I'm getting across to them is they're not meeting my expectations of them,
Right.
and so that's why it is so important to take the time to be introspective, so that even if it's, I have said, I have said to my kids, I'm being unrealistic about what I think we can actually do today. And just like bringing them into the fold. Like, sorry, I messed up here. And, I think at least they know then that like this is my problem and not theirs.
Right. Or that you've explained to them, this is the scenario and this is what is realistic and now we're going to readjust. Like
Yeah.
it's perfectly normal and acceptable in a day to make adjustments to your schedule. There's nothing unusual about that. And so teaching kids that from a young age is a good thing.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
beating ourselves up for it is not a good thing.
I want to talk we need to take a very quick break before we wrap up, but I do want to just talk about this for just another quick minute. So let's just take a quick break and we will be right back to talk about this more. Know what I really love to do?
Take baths, go for walks, read, drink margaritas, hike.
Yeah, not what I was referring to. You know, we're recording a commercial right now.
I do, but I'm thinking outside the box, being adaptable.
As I was saying, what I love to do is host our live monthly workshops.
Oh, right. That's what we were talking about. Me too. They are a lot of fun to put together and host every month. And we can bring margaritas, so.
Join us for live conversation as we get a bit deeper into topics near and dear to our hearts. We go through everything from self care to setting boundaries.
We share coaching tips, practical advice, and take questions from the audience. It's a whole lot of fun.
Sign up for our newsletter today at goboldlyinitiative.com/contact to make sure you hear about all the upcoming Go Boldly workshops.
You definitely don't want to miss out. Now, back to that show.
Welcome back. Something struck me as you were talking, which is this goes back to making sure that you have friends around you that you can have honest conversations with about parenting. Because when I have lost my cool or I've had what I would consider my own temper tantrum or meltdown, and I've texted a friend and been like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I just did this. Like, I feel awful." And she has texted back and said, "It is okay for your kids to know that you have emotions." And it was like, oh, now I might need to sit them down and say, like, this is what happened, because you don't want kids to feel scared or insecure or like anything like that, depending on what my emotions were. But I think one of the greatest ways to make sure that you're not raising perfectionists, or that you're helping your children who are naturally inclined to be perfectionists, because you and I were talking, Riley, all of our kids have different temperaments. And so some I'm not worried about being perfectionists and others are on that road. But just to be honest with them and show them that you're not perfect and you're not trying to be perfect, and that you have feelings, that they're big feelings. And I always use this example, and I've probably talked about it here, but like I highly recommend, especially for kids like baking, but even if they don't, maybe they'll like baking after it. I spent a lot of time, and we need to do it again, watching Nailed It with my oldest son.
Yes. Yeah.
It is such a good show because there are lovely, delightful, there's that word, incredibly accomplished adults on the show that are lawyers and firefighters and teachers, and they're great at whatever they do. They're not good bakers. And they seem to all like baking, and they're like, I really wanted to come on the show because I really want to get better. And it's like, well, this is not the show for you to do that, but cool. And they're like, I always like to make my kids cookies and they don't like them, and then they like show them like banging the cookies on the countertop because they're so hard.
Yeah.
But they go on the show and they usually make horrible looking cakes, just really, really bad. And it has been so much fun with my kids watching that show and showing them how adults can be good at one thing and bad at the other, and we should still try new things. And and so I know that we could talk another hour about what to do to help through achievement culture and parenting and kids, and maybe we will talk about that at some point. I have a whole bunch of stories to talk about that. But if we're talking about what to do with our own, like, how do we start the process of being imperfect around our kids? right? When we want to give our kids the world. And I know everyone might be listening and laughing, like, of course I'm imperfect around our kids, but there's like, there's also like, we try so hard. Parents try so hard to do the
Yeah.
best we can for our kids. And I think even though we might not have an expectation of perfectionism, or we might, we don't always do a good job of showing our kids how to like be a human being. Like we just want to smooth out the edges for them, right? We want to make everything nice and easy for them. And so I think that, telling your kids like, yep, I get upset and I cry. And, or I mean, most of the time it's when I'm reading a book like Rosie Revere Engineer, but gets me right in the feels. But like, it is okay to tell your kids why you're frustrated and be like, I'm sorry, I'm frustrated. I mean, I used to have all my checklist of, because I had a checklist too where I could earn points and prizes at the beginning of the pandemic, to take timeouts.
Yeah.
And my kids held me accountable because we talked about how you take timeouts when you need a break. The reason that you get a timeout as a quote punishment is because you need a break. But how about you just take your break before you actually need the break? Here's a wacky idea.
Right.
And so I would take timeouts, and I mean, the kids could see a difference, and the kids know why I meditate because I'm a better version of myself. And so I think having an open dialogue, it doesn't make you suddenly not feel guilty when things aren't perfect, or not strive for perfection if that's something that's been hard for you. But having an open conversation with your kids can, I think, help a lot of the fallout of it.
Yeah. And starting to focus on the experience of living and
Yeah.
not focus on the outcome of whatever you're doing for yourself or for your kids makes a huge difference. And it's not a particularly easy switch to make because we're just an outcome focused culture.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
as you said, Tova, we could talk about for another hour,
And maybe we will.
and maybe we will. That's how we've all been raised, I think, in a lot of ways. But if you can make that switch with your kids, particularly, but also with yourself, to focus on, if you're baking or whatever, focus on the experience of doing it and you know,
Yeah.
the each step along the way, as opposed to whatever you're going to have at the end of it. Um, it, it changes the dynamic with you and your kids. It'll change the dynamic with you yourself. And it's easier with some things than others. I mean, I'm trying to get back into running, and I'm trying not to focus on the outcome of being able to run a 5K again and then a 10K and all those things. But it's easier said than done a lot of times, but it does, and it keeps you more present, and it keeps you less in that perfectionist mode of like, oh, but if I can't run the 5K right away, then why am I doing it, right? And
Yeah.
that's such an unhealthy attitude to take with things. And yeah, you have to change the mindset. My kid came up with, she does, hopefully she won't mind me saying this, but I'm gonna put it out there anyway. She does mantras. She writes down mantras every morning, and one of hers this morning was about having. I can't remember the exact wording, but it was something about, having to think about the changing her mindset, and about like, if I think I can, then I can. If I think I can't, then I can't. And you know what? It was great, and it really changed the way I was thinking about things this morning, and
Yeah.
put me much more in a present state of being as opposed to an outcome focused state of being. And I think that that's a huge lift from that perfectionist mode of being, of constantly wanting everything to turn out exactly the way it's supposed to, and needing to control the outcome, and all of those things. So to the extent that you can do that, it will make a big difference. I do want to just note that if you feel like you're pushing your kids to be perfect, one little cue for that is, if you're based on this whole outcome concept, is if you're treating your kids' activities like a math test or a soccer game, like they're life altering events for those kids, That's a big cue that you're treating your kids like they're perfectionists as well. Something I had to teach myself to stop doing. So just putting that out there.
Just putting that out there.
I have a whole
Um,
list of things, but that one really stood out to me. I was like, oh, I used to do that.
yeah, no, and I think that a important conversation, or something that I guess I'm learning as part of this season is one of the ways to make sure you are embracing your own personal worth and also letting go of the busyness and this outcome achievement is to be present and do things because it's fun.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what our homework is today. I do know we need to be sharing it with
Yes.
people.
Yes, we do. So I think the homework for today is, as always, a bit of journaling. What I'd like for you all to do is to grab your journals, think about how you are, if you're a parent, think about how you are parenting right now. Are you pushing your kids to be something or do something that they're not? Do you feel, to reflect on it and be honest with yourself? Are you pushing them? And do you feel that perfectionism or the demanding or the any of those things that we talked about before? And,
Right.
if you need to set a timer, set a timer. We always suggest about 10 minutes. And just, free write about it. And then I want you to do the same, but I want you to think back to your childhood and really reflect on, if it's safe and healthy for you to do so. If it's not, do this with a therapist, please. Think about what whoever your parental figure was, think about what your experience was like growing up. Did you have this kind of perfectionism in your life? Was it overt, or was it something that happened, kind of quietly without you realizing it? I think a lot of us had perfectionism in our lives without us even realizing it, just culturally. So do those two activities. And then when you're done with that, take a minute to do one more journaling and imagine your ideal day with your kids and how you would be. And once you've done that, just compare to how you were raised and how you're currently raising your kids. And then I think from those 3 activities, you can start to see how to get to where you want to be. And feel free to share any or all of that, whatever you're comfortable with us on social media. You can tag us at Go Boldly Together. We're on all the socials. If you want to get further in depth with any of it, we have plenty of time to talk to you. Feel free to reach out to us anytime you want. We are happy to work with you on this concept or any other concepts that might need a little bit of tweaking. We know how it goes. And otherwise, I think that's it for this week.
I think so. And we'll be back next week with another guest.
All right. Sounds good. We'll talk to you all next week.
Thanks so much for listening to We Go Boldly podcast. We know you're busy and we love spending time with you.
If you enjoyed this week's episode, let us know. Head to Apple Podcasts right now to rate and review our show. While you're there, be sure to click that subscribe button.
Want more us time? Follow us on all the socials at Go Boldly Together.
Want even more us time? As in all the coaching pizzazz. Find us at goboldlyinitiative.com for all the info.
We will be back with more excitement, research, and deep thoughts next week.
Until then, keep on being the bold, brave, amazing people we know you already are.